Not all coins are what they seem. Some were spent without a second thought. Yet they're worth thousands, even millions today, hidden in drawers, jars, and pockets. Are pieces of history waiting to be discovered. At Rare Coins, we uncover the real value, the truth behind the hype, and the coins collectors would do anything to own. Welcome to Rare Coins. Imagine holding a nickel that looks ordinary to the untrained eye. Yet collectors have paid more than $350,000 for a single example. That's right, the legendary 1916 double-die Buffalo nickel. This isn't just a coin. It's one of the most dramatic and iconic errors in American numismatics, and one that continues to send shockwaves through the hobby every time one appears at auction. So why is this coin so special? Well, in 1916, the Buffalo nickel design was still fairly new. It had only been introduced in 1913. James Earl Fraser's bold design featuring the proud Native American on the obverse and the massive American bison on the reverse was meant to celebrate the American West, but it also gave the mint no shortage of headaches. The dies wore down quickly, the design elements didn't strike evenly, and the mint was constantly trying to improve production. And it was in this environment that one of the greatest minting blunders in U.S. history occurred. On certain 1916 Buffalo nickels struck in Philadelphia, the hub that carried the design was impressed into the working die more than once and not aligned correctly. The result? Some of the most dramatic doubling you will ever see on a U.S. coin. The word Liberty is strongly doubled, as is the entire date, 1916. And unlike some subtle double dies that require a magnifying glass to appreciate, this one hits you right in the face. Even a casual glance makes you say, something's different about this coin. Now here's where the story gets even wilder. For decades, most Americans spent Buffalo nickels without a second thought. Nobody knew this error existed. It wasn't until sharp-eyed collectors started examining old nickels that the double die of 1916 gained legendary status. And because so few were produced and even fewer survived in good condition, this coin became an instant holy grail once it was recognized. Let's talk prices because this is where jaws start dropping. Back in the 1960s, when collectors first began competing for major double dies, examples of the 1916 were selling for a few $100, a big deal at the time. By the 1980s, those same coins were hitting five figures. Then came the explosion. In 2004, an example graded MS64 by PCGS sold for a staggering $281,750. More recently, Heritage Auctions sold a beautiful specimen for nearly $350,000, and the truth is, if a gem-quality mint-state coin came to market today, it could easily push $500,000 or more. But what about lower grades? Well, don't be fooled into thinking you need a pristine example to strike it rich. Even a well-worn 1916 doubled die nickel in fine or very fine condition can bring thousands. Circulated examples frequently sell for $10,000 to $20,000, depending on the details and eye appeal. And once you get into extremely fine and about uncirculated territory, the values soar: $40,000, $60,000, even over $100,000 in some cases. This is where supply and demand come into play. Every year, more collectors chase fewer coins. And in the case of the 1916 double die, the supply is vanishingly small. Experts believe only a few dozen exist across all grades. That's right, a few dozen out of millions of Buffalo nickels struck that year. Scarcity like that creates a frenzy, and the demand only grows stronger with time. Think about it. The Buffalo nickel already has a passionate collector base. It's one of the most beloved designs in U.S. coinage. Add in one of the most dramatic double dies ever produced, and you have the perfect storm. Collectors, investors, and even museums want one. The result is a coin that has skyrocketed in price every single decade since it was discovered. Now here's something fascinating. The 1916 double die stands shoulder to shoulder with other famous double dies in American coinage. The 1955 Lincoln cent double die, that one's legendary, and sells for thousands even in lower grades. The 1969 double die cent, another monster rarity. But among nickels, the 1916 Buffalo is the king. No other double die nickel even comes close in terms of drama, desirability, and price. Collectors often ask, how do you know if you found one? Well, the answer is, if you did, you'd probably know instantly. The doubling is that bold. Look closely at the date, the 1916. Almost looks like it's been shadowed. Like a double exposure, the word Liberty is thick, as though stamped twice. If you ever see that on a buffalo nickel, do not spend it, do not clean it, and get it authenticated immediately, because that's the kind of find that can literally change your life. And speaking of cleaning, let me repeat the golden rule of coin collecting. Never clean a coin, ever. A single swipe with a cloth can destroy thousands of dollars in value. Collectors pay for originality, natural toning, honest wear, unaltered surfaces. A cleaned coin, no matter how rare, will always be worth less. And in the case of a six-figure rarity, like the 1916 double die, cleaning could cost you tens of thousands. So where can one of these coins still be found? Believe it or not, some have turned up in old collections, in forgotten cigar boxes, in estate sales where the heirs had no idea what they were holding. Others have been cherry-picked from dealer inventories by sharp-eyed buyers. While the odds are slim, the truth is that rare coins like this do still surface from time to time, and that's what keeps the dream alive for collectors everywhere. The bigger picture here is what coins like the 1916 double die represent. They are tangible pieces of history, frozen in time. They tell the story of America in the early 20th century, of minting technology that wasn't quite perfect, of designs that pushed the limits, and of mistakes that turned into treasures. They also represent the incredible power of supply and demand. Each year, fewer examples trade hands, and each year, the demand from wealthy collectors and investors grows stronger. And when you have that kind of imbalance, the sky's the limit for prices. So here's the bottom line. The 1916 double die buffalo nickel is more than just a coin. It's a legend. It's a piece of American history that has captivated generations of collectors. It's proof that something as small as a 5-cent piece can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's a reminder that even today, in change jars, collections, and dealer cases across the country, treasures are still out there waiting to be discovered. If you're lucky enough to find one, you're not just holding metal. You're holding a fortune. You're holding a dream. You're holding a story that connects you directly to America's past and to a market of collectors willing to pay staggering sums for it. So the next time you see an old buffalo nickel, don't dismiss it as pocket change. Take a closer look, because who knows? You might just be holding the next great discovery, the coin that could change your life forever. Imagine a nickel so rare and high grade that collectors have paid over $600,000 for a single coin. That's the story of the 1926 Buffalo Nickel, one of the most legendary and elusive dates in the entire Buffalo series. To the average person, it looks like just another old nickel. But to a collector, it's a holy grail, an icon of scarcity, history, and value. Let's start with the numbers that make jaws drop. In 2008, a pristine example graded MS66 by PCGS sold at auction for an astonishing $322,000. Just a few years later, another gem shattered that record, hammering for over $600,000. Even in slightly lower mint state grades, such as MS65, the coin consistently brings six figures. We're talking $100,000 to $200,000 depending on eye appeal, luster, and strike. And here's the kicker. Even heavily circulated examples, the kind you might think belong in a pocket change jar, can still fetch hundreds or even thousands of dollars. So why is this coin so valuable? The answer comes down to a perfect storm of rarity and poor striking quality. In 1926, the San Francisco Mint produced just 970,000 buffalo nickels. That may sound like a lot, but in the world of coin collecting, it's an incredibly small number. To put it in perspective, most other buffalo nickels from the 1920s were minted in the tens of millions. The 1926S had the lowest mintage of the entire series. That fact alone makes it special. But scarcity and mintage is only part of the story. What really makes the 1926S so tough is the quality of the strikes. San Francisco Mint dies were notorious for producing weakly struck coins during this era. Many 1926S nickels have flat details, especially on the bison's head and shoulder, and on the Native American's hair braid. As a result, finding one with a sharp, well-defined strike is almost impossible. The vast majority of survivors are dull, poorly detailed, and heavily circulated, which means when a gem pops up, a coin with strong details, full luster and eye appeal, the bidding wars get fierce, driving prices into the stratosphere. This is why collectors often call the Rarest the Mount Everest of Buffalo nickels. It's the ultimate challenge, not just rare in numbers but rare in quality. It tests the patience, resources, and dedication of even the most advanced numismatists. For those building a complete Buffalo nickel set in high grade, the 1926S is usually the last piece of the puzzle, and the one that costs the most. Now let's dig deeper into the history. By 1926, America was in the middle of the Roaring Twenties, a time of jazz, speakeasies, rapid growth, and optimism. The Buffalo nickel, introduced in 1913, was already a popular design with the public, but the mint was still struggling to keep dies in good condition. In San Francisco especially, dies were often overused. That's one reason so many 1926S nickels look worn out right from the start. Combine that with the low mintage, and you have a coin destined for legendary status. Over the decades, collectors gradually realized just how scarce this date was. At first, in the 1930s and 40s, circulated examples were trading for a few cents above face value. But by the 1950s, serious Buffalo collectors started driving up demand, and prices for nice circulated coins rose into the dollars. By the 1970s, a lightly circulated 1926S could fetch $100 or more, a huge sum at the time. And as grading services like PCGS and NGC came onto the scene in the 1980s, collectors began competing fiercely for the few, higher-grade examples in existence. That's when the real explosion began, pushing gem prices into the tens of thousands and beyond. Today, the 1926S Buffalo nickel holds a legendary reputation. It's not just one of the most valuable nickels ever made. It's one of the key dates across all of American coinage. Investors love it because of its proven record of growth in value. Collectors love it because of the challenge and the beauty of the Buffalo design. And historians love it because it captures the essence of 1920s America. Rugged, bold but imperfect. Think about it this way. There are thousands of wealthy collectors who would love to own one, but only a handful of coins exist in top condition. That's the definition of supply and demand. Scarcity drives value, and with the 1926S, scarcity is absolute. Experts estimate that only a few dozen gem examples exist today, most locked away in private collections or museums. Every time one comes to market, the numismatic world watches. But here's what's really exciting. Even if you don't have six figures to spend, this coin is still worth looking out for. A well-worn 1926S can sell for $50 to $200, sometimes more. A moderately circulated one, say in very fine or extremely fine condition, can bring $500 to $2,000. These are real, attainable numbers for everyday collectors, and they represent a chance to own a piece of numismatic legend without breaking the bank. And yes, treasures do still surface. Estate sales, old collections, and coin rolls occasionally reveal forgotten 1926S nickels. The odds are slim, but the possibility keeps collectors searching. After all, the Buffalo nickel series circulated heavily for decades, and millions were tucked away in jars, boxes, and drawers. Who knows what's still out there waiting to be discovered? The moral of the story is simple. The 1926S Buffalo nickel is more than just money. It's a symbol of rarity, history, and the thrill of collecting. It shows us how a humble 5-cent coin can become a six-figure treasure. It proves that condition and scarcity matter, and that even small coins can carry enormous value. And it reminds us that every old coin we hold has a story, and sometimes that story is worth a fortune. So the next time you see a Buffalo nickel, take a closer look. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Because if you see 1926 with that tiny S beneath it, you just might be holding one of the rarest and most valuable nickels in the world. And whether it's worn down or gem quality, that little coin could change your life forever. Imagine a nickel that looks ordinary to the untrained eye, but a tiny mint mark mistake makes it worth thousands of dollars. That's the story of the 1942 D over horizontal D Jefferson Nickel, one of the most dramatic and collectible varieties in all of American coinage. Let's begin with the numbers that make collectors' eyes widen. At auction, Top-graded examples have commanded incredible sums. A pristine MS-67 full steps example sold for nearly $33,000. Even in lower, mint state grades, like MS-65, the coin can bring $2,000 to $5,000. And circulated examples, believe it or not, even a well-worn one can still be worth hundreds of dollars, depending on the clarity of the repunched mint mark. That's the kind of power this variety holds, a single little D, punched twice at the wrong angle, and suddenly an everyday nickel turns into a treasure. So what exactly happened in 1942? The Denver Mint was producing Jefferson Nickels, and the mint marks at that time were punched into the dies by hand. Mistakes happened. On one particular die, the D mint mark was first punched sideways, horizontally, before being corrected with a proper vertical punch. The result is a clear, visible error, a normal D on top, and a faint horizontal D underneath. This makes it not just an ordinary repunched mint mark, but a highly dramatic one, easy to see with the naked eye and unforgettable once spotted. Now, 1942 was an important year for nickels in general. It marked the transition from regular copper-nickel composition to the wartime silver alloy. As World War II raged, nickel metal was needed for military production, armor plating, weapons and machinery. So later in 1942, the U.S. Mint switched to making silver nickels, with 35% silver in the alloy. But the 1942 D over horizontal D was struck before that change, meaning it's one of the last regular copper-nickel coins before the war nickels began. That historical backdrop adds even more intrigue to this variety. Collectors love it for three reasons: visibility, rarity, and story. Many repunched mint marks require magnification to see, but this one is bold. The horizontal D stands out. Once you know what to look for, it's unmistakable. Second, it's genuinely scarce. Not every 1942 D nickel has this error. Only those struck from that particular die pair. That means only a limited supply exists, and many were lost to circulation long ago. Third, the story is compelling. It's not just a double date or a subtle die variety. It's a clear human error, frozen in metal during the chaos of wartime minting. Over the decades, its reputation has grown. In the 1950s and 60s, collectors began cataloging mint mark varieties, and the 1942 D over horizontal D quickly stood out as a must-have. By the time third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC began certifying coins in the 1980s, its market value had skyrocketed. Every appearance in high grade sparked bidding wars. Today it remains one of the most famous varieties in the Jefferson Nickel series, often included in the top 10 list of must-own Jeffersons. Now let's talk about what makes it such a challenge to collect. First, strike quality. Jefferson Nickels are notorious for weak strikes, especially in the steps of Monticello on the reverse. Collectors prize examples with full steps, sharp, uninterrupted lines at the base of the building. But finding a 1942 D over horizontal D with full steps is almost impossible. That's why those rare gems, when they do show up, sell for tens of thousands of dollars. The combination of the error and the condition is the perfect recipe for rarity. Second, survival rates. Remember, nickels circulated heavily during the 1940s. These weren't coins people were setting aside. They were working coins in the middle of wartime America. They bought rationed goods, cigarettes, stamps, and bus rides. Millions of nickels passed from hand to hand daily. That means most 1942 D over horizontal D nickels wore down quickly. The few that survived in high grades are the elite survivors, the best of the best. Even circulated ones are valuable, though. A fine or very fine example might bring $50 to $150. Extra fine examples can hit $200 to $400. And once you get into mint state, the values leap into the thousands. That makes this coin approachable for collectors at all levels. Whether you're a beginner who just wants a circulated piece, or a high-end collector chasing the dream of a full steps gem. Another interesting angle is that this variety connects the Jefferson Nickel to the broader history of U.S. minting errors. The hand-punching of mint marks created dozens of fascinating repunched varieties across different denominations: pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, even half dollars. But the 1942 D over horizontal D is one of the most dramatic examples ever produced. It shows just how human the process was. One slip of the hand, one wrong angle with the punch, and suddenly history was made. So let's step back and look at the bigger picture. What does this coin represent? It represents the unpredictability of minting, the artistry of error, the way a small detail can elevate an ordinary coin into a six-figure prize. It represents the passion of collectors, who spend decades chasing that perfect piece. And most of all, it represents opportunity, the idea that a coin you might overlook at first glance could hold a story worth thousands. Think about it. How many 1942D nickels are still out there in drawers, jars, or collections waiting to be discovered? How many people have handled this variety without ever realizing what they had? The possibility fuels the excitement. It's what makes coin collecting a treasure hunt. The 1942D, over horizontal D Jefferson Nickel, isn't just a coin, it's a mystery, a challenge, and a prize all rolled into one. Whether you're holding a circulated piece worth $100, or you're one of the lucky few who own a gem worth tens of thousands, you're part of that story. And every time one comes to market, the numismatic world is reminded of how a simple mistake can become a legend. So the next time you see a Jefferson nickel, especially a 1942D, take a closer look. Check the mint mark carefully, because that faint sideways D could mean you're holding not just 5 cents, but a piece of American history and maybe even a life-changing fortune. Imagine a nickel so ordinary in appearance, yet so rare in survival that it became one of the most hoarded coins of the 20th century. That's the story of the 1950D Jefferson nickel, a coin that still excites collectors to this day. Let's begin with the numbers that always grab attention, the prices. A top-graded MS67 full steps, 1950D, has sold at auction for over $30,000. Even a step below, MS66 full steps examples regularly bring $3,000 to $6,000 standard mint. State coins without full steps still command strong prices, often $100 to $400 depending on grade. And circulated examples, while not extremely rare, still carry collector value, typically $10 to $25, far above face value. But why is this nickel so famous? The answer is mintage. In 1950, the Denver Mint struck only 630 nickels. To this day, that's the lowest mintage of any regular Jefferson nickel ever produced. And in the world of coin collecting, low mintage equals high demand. The 1950D instantly stood out as a rarity. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Unlike many classic rarities that went unnoticed at the time, the 1950D was recognized almost immediately. Coin collectors of the 1950s knew it was scarce. Dealers began promoting it. Collectors started hoarding it in rolls. Thousands of people set aside fresh 1950D nickels straight from the bank, anticipating they would become treasures someday. And they weren't wrong. This early recognition created something unique, a modern coin rarity with high survival rates in mint state. Unlike coins such as the 1913 Liberty Nickel or 1909 SVDB Lincoln Cent, which are rare because so few were saved, the 1950D is rare because so few were struck in the first place. But the ones that did exist, many were preserved carefully, often in full rolls. That's why you can still find nice mint state examples today. Even so, condition still matters. And that's where the full steps designation makes the difference. As Jefferson nickel collectors know, the steps on Monticello are notoriously hard to strike fully. Most 1950D nickels, even those kept in rolls, show weakness or wear on the steps. Finding one with 5 or 6 fully defined steps is extremely difficult. That's why full steps examples command such premium prices. They are the cream of the crop. Let's add more context. In 1950, America was coming out of World War II and entering the post-war boom. Millions of coins were being struck each year at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Yet for reasons never fully explained, the Denver Mint struck only 2.6 million nickels that year. Compare that to the 46 million nickels struck at Philadelphia in 1950, and the rarity of the 1950D becomes clear. Collectors quickly spread the word, and a kind of roll craze began. By the late 1950s and 1960s, entire rolls of 1950D nickels were trading for high premiums. Stories circulated of coin dealers advertising them as the rarest nickel ever made. Parents and grandparents bought rolls and stashed them away, expecting future generations to cash in. This was one of the first times in U.S. coin history that a coin became famous as a rarity while it was still relatively new. Now, over 70 years later, the 1950s legend has only grown. It remains a key date in the Jefferson Nickel series. Anyone building a complete set of Jeffersons needs it, and that constant demand keeps the price strong. While it may not be as elusive as some errors or varieties, its status as the king of the Jefferson Nickels ensures it will always be a highlight in any collection. Let's talk about the market today. In circulated grades, the coin is affordable, allowing new collectors to obtain one without breaking the bank. But serious collectors compete fiercely for the highest grades with full steps. Population reports from PCGS and NGC show just how few exist at those elite levels. That's why every auction appearance is an event, drawing bidders who want the best of the best. Another fascinating aspect of the 1950D is its role in teaching collectors about supply and demand. Because so many were saved, it's not nearly as rare in mint state as its mintage might suggest. But the perception of rarity, the knowledge that it's the lowest mintage Jefferson, gives it a kind of mythical reputation. It's a coin that taught a generation of collectors the value of hoarding low mintage issues. For investors and collectors alike, the 1950D is a lesson in timing. Those who bought rolls in the 1950s and 1960s made excellent returns as prices climbed over the decades. Even today, original bank-wrapped rolls of 1950D nickels can sell for thousands of dollars. The demand hasn't gone away, and it likely never will. So what does this coin represent? It represents scarcity, perception, and history. It shows how a single number, to us a million minted, can elevate a coin from common, change to a legendary rarity. It shows how collectors shape the market, turning an ordinary nickel into an icon. And most of all, it shows the thrill of the hunt, the joy of knowing you own a coin that everyone in the hobby recognizes instantly. The 1950D Jefferson Nickel isn't flashy. It doesn't have a dramatic error or unusual metal content. But what it does have is legacy. A legacy of being the coin that captured the imagination of mid-20th century collectors. A legacy of inspiring generations to look more closely at their change. And a legacy of holding its place as one of the true keys to the Jefferson series. So the next time you hear someone talk about Jefferson Nickels, remember the 1950D, the little coin from Denver that became a giant in the world of collecting. Whether you own one in circulated condition, mint state, or the dream of a full steps gem, you hold a piece of numismatic history, the coin that turned an ordinary nickel into a modern legend. Imagine a coin so legendary that even non-collectors know its name. The 1937D three-legged buffalo nickel, an error so striking, so unusual, that it transformed an ordinary nickel into one of the most desirable rarities of the 20th century. Let's start with the jaw-dropping numbers. In top-grade MS-66, this coin has sold for over $100,000 at major auctions. Even MS-65 examples routinely bring $40,000 to $70 Zerero in the more common mint state grades, like MS-63, you're still looking at $10,000 to $15,000. Even circulated pieces, in grades like fine or very fine, can fetch $1,000 to $3,000. That means no matter the condition, the 1937D three-legged buffalo nickel is a treasure. But what makes it so famous? The answer is right in the name. The buffalo on the reverse is missing one of its legs. Instead of 4, this proud American bison stands awkwardly on just 3. The front leg appears polished away, leaving collectors with one of the strangest and most obvious mint errors ever released into circulation. So how did this happen? The story begins at the Denver Mint in 1937. Mint workers were struggling with dies that had clashed and developed damage. In an effort to extend their use, a worker aggressively polished one of the dies, grinding away the detail of the buffalo's right front leg. The die was then used to strike coins, creating thousands of three-legged buffalo nickels. What was meant as a quick fix turned into one of the most famous errors in American coinage. When these coins entered circulation, people noticed. Collectors quickly realized something was wrong with the design. Word spread, And the three-legged nickel became a sought-after variety almost immediately. Unlike some rarities that went unnoticed for decades, this one became famous right away. One reason the error stands out so clearly is because the missing leg isn't subtle. It's not a tiny double date or a faint mint mark variety. It's a missing limb on the coin's central design. Even casual observers can spot it at a glance, making it one of the easiest major errors to identify. Now let's talk about rarity. No one knows exactly how many were struck, but estimates suggest perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 pieces made it into circulation. Many were spent and worn down, but thousands were saved once the variety became known. Today, it's believed that several thousand still exist, enough to supply collector demand, but not nearly enough to make it common. The coin's popularity also comes from the series it belongs to, the Buffalo Nickel, one of the most beloved designs in U.S. coinage. James Earl Fraser's depiction of a Native American on the obverse and a mighty American bison on the reverse is iconic. Adding a dramatic error to that already popular design was a recipe for fame. For collectors, the three-legged buffalo is often considered the ultimate must-have variety in the series. It's not technically a regular date and mint issue, but its status as a major variety has given it key date status alongside rarities like the 1913 Type 1 and the 1926S. Anyone building a serious Buffalo Nickel set needs one. Condition, of course, plays a huge role in value. Circulated coins are available for collectors on a budget, but mint state examples, especially those with sharp details and attractive toning, bring fierce bidding wars at auction. Full luster strong strikes and eye appeal can make the difference between a $10,000 coin and a $50,000 coin. One thing collectors must be careful about is counterfeits. Because the missing leg is such a simple visual feature, many fakes have been made by polishing normal 1937D nickels to mimic the effect. Genuine examples, however, show distinct diagnostics, like a moth-eaten appearance above the missing leg and extra dye, polishing lines near the buffalo's belly. Serious collectors always look for those details, or buy only certified examples from PCGS or NGC. Beyond its rarity and value, the 1937D three-legged Buffalo Nickel holds a special place in numismatic lore. It's a coin with a story, a mistake by a mint worker, a design flaw that became a legend, and a piece of history that captures the imagination of every collector who sees it. It reminds us that sometimes imperfections are what make something truly great. Even today, when you mention the three-legged buffalo in collecting circles, everyone knows exactly what coin you're talking about. It doesn't need a date, a mint, or even a description. Just the phrase alone carries weight. That's how famous it is. So whether you own one in well-worn condition or dream of owning a gem mint example, the 1937D three-legged Buffalo Nickel represents more than just a piece of change. It represents the drama of the minting process, the unpredictability of errors, and the way collectors can elevate a simple mistake into an enduring treasure. The missing leg turned an ordinary nickel into an American icon, and today, it stands proudly, on 3 legs instead of 4, as one of the most legendary coins in U.S. history. The 1893 Liberty Head nickel is one of those coins that can quietly surprise collectors. At first glance, it doesn't scream rarity. It's not an error like the 1937D three-legged buffalo, and it's not a famous key date like the 1913 Liberty Nickel. But for those who know the Liberty Head or V Nickel series, the 1893 stands out as a low mintage sleeper, a coin that, in higher grades, has staggering value. Let's start with the prices. In top-end mint state condition, especially MS65 and higher, this coin has brought $25,000 to $40. Euro at auction, a superb gem MS66 example can push $50,000 or more because so few exist. Even in mid-range mint state, like MS63 or MS64, you're talking $5,000 to $15,000. And here's the shocking part. Even circulated examples, depending on grade, can fetch hundreds of dollars, and with VF or XF coins selling for $200 to $500 and AU coins climbing toward the $1,000 mark. For a nickel with a mintage over 5 million, Those numbers are eye-opening. So what makes the 1893 so special? It all comes down to a combination of mintage, survival rate, and condition rarity. The official mintage was just over 5.4 million pieces and low compared to many other dates in the series. But the real problem is survival. Most of the 1893 nickels went straight into circulation, where they were used hard and worn down. Very few were set aside in mint state at the time, which means that today, uncirculated survivors are extremely scarce. That's where the phrase business strike uncirculated ++ comes in. If you can find a coin struck for circulation that somehow survived without ever being spent, and still has full luster and sharp detail, you found a rarity. And for 1893, those are almost impossible to locate. The Liberty Head nickel series itself has an interesting story. Introduced in 1883, it replaced the shield nickel and quickly gained popularity. The obverse shows Lady Liberty with a coronet, surrounded by 13 stars. The reverse features a large Roman numeral V for 5 cents, surrounded by a wreath. In 1893, the design had been in use for a decade, and while it was familiar to the public, the mint was already preparing for future changes. Within a few years, in 1913, the Liberty nickel would be replaced by the Buffalo nickel, but among all the Liberty Head dates, 1893 stands out because of its scarcity in higher grades. Collectors call it a sleeper, a coin that doesn't always get the attention of other rarities, but quietly commands huge prices when quality examples come up for sale. Auction houses always see competitive bidding on gem 1893s, because specialists know how rare they are. One of the best examples is an MS-66 graded by PCGS, which sold for nearly $40,000. Another gem brought similar numbers at heritage auctions. These results prove that, while the coin may not have the fame of the 1913 Liberty nickel, its rarity in mint state makes it a powerhouse in its own right. Even in lower grades, demand is strong. Collectors building full Liberty Head sets can't skip 1893. And because fewer examples survive in nice condition, competition is always there. Dealers often say it's one of the tougher dates to find in problem-free VF or better. The challenge with Liberty Head nickels is also eye appeal. Many coins suffer from weak strikes, unattractive toning, or surface marks. So when you find an 1893 with sharp detail, clean surfaces, and bright luster, it immediately stands out, and collectors are willing to pay premium money for it. It's worth noting that, while 1893 is not the lowest mintage date in the series, its survival pattern makes it rarer than some lower mintage years. For example, coins like the 1885 and 1886 are famous low mintage rarities, but the 1893 sneaks in as a condition rarity that can match them in value at the high end. For anyone collecting the Liberty Head series, the 1893 is considered one of the must-have sleepers. It's the kind of coin that makes advanced collectors sit up and pay attention because they know just how few top-grade survivors exist. And in the grand story of American nickels, the 1893 Liberty Head is a reminder that rarity isn't always about the absolute lowest mintage. Sometimes it's about how many survive, how they survived, and what condition they're in today. That's why this coin, often overlooked by beginners, has become a cornerstone of serious collections. So whether you're holding a well-worn example worth a few $100s, or you're chasing one of the legendary mint state gems that sell for tens of thousands, the 1893 Liberty Head nickel is a piece of American history that carries surprising power. A coin that proves, in numismatics, sometimes the real treasures are hiding in plain sight. The 1905 Liberty Head nickel might not look like a headline rarity at first glance, but when we talk about choice brilliant uncirculated examples, that's where the true power of this coin is revealed. Let's begin with the numbers. In gem mint state condition, this coin can bring $8,000 to $12,000 at auction. A certified MS-66 example has sold for nearly $20,000, and if you move even higher into MS-67 territory, which is practically unheard of for this date, you're talking about a 5-figure coin that can shock collectors. Even MS-65s regularly trade between $4,000 and $7,000, while solid CHBU coins in MS-63 to MS-64 easily command $1,000 to $2,500. What about lower grades? Well, in circulated condition, the 1905 Liberty nickel is relatively affordable. A finer VF example might only bring $20 to $50 and even an AU coin can be found in the $100 to $200 range. But here's the critical point. This massive gap between circulated and gem prices shows us one thing very clearly: condition rarity. The official mintage of the 1905 Liberty Nickel was 29.8 million pieces, a high number compared to earlier low mintage Liberty heads, like 1885 or 1886 at face value. That sounds common. But here's the catch. Almost every one of those 29 million coins entered circulation and was used hard. People spent these nickels daily in the early 20th century, in shops, in transit, and everyday transactions. By the time coin collectors started paying closer attention to Liberty head nickels, very few pristine examples were left. That's why choice brilliant uncirculated survivors are so special. It's not the mintage that makes the 1905 rare. It's the survival rate of high-grade examples. Coins with full original luster, sharp details, and minimal marks are very difficult to find. Let's talk about the Liberty Head series itself for context. Designed by Charles E. Barber, it ran from 1883 to 1912, featuring Lady Liberty wearing a coronet on the obverse, with the reverse dominated by a large Roman numeral V for 5 cents. By 1905, the design had been in use for over 20 years, and the mint was already beginning to face criticism that the coinage designs were stale. Within less than a decade, the Liberty Head would be replaced by the Buffalo Nickel, a complete shift in artistic style. But here's why the 1905 date has become so respected in today's market. Collectors who build full sets of Liberty nickels quickly realize that the early 1900s dates are deceptively tough to locate in mint state. Yes, you can find worn examples easily, but if you want a true gem, brilliant surfaces, crisp strike, no major contact marks, and the supply shrinks dramatically. That's why certified CHBU coins from 1905 always sell for premium money. Auction records back this up. APTGSMS66 example with dazzling luster brought $18,800 at Heritage Auctions, another in the same grade crossed the block for just over $17,000. These numbers prove the demand is real, and even collectors who can't reach for that level will compete fiercely for MS63s and S64s because they're still relatively affordable compared to the ultra-high-end pieces. Another factor that makes this coin tricky is the strike quality. Many 1905 nickels are weakly struck, especially on the hair detail of Liberty and the wreath on the reverse. So when you find one that's fully struck and choice brilliant, it's a standout piece. Add strong luster and clean surfaces, and you're looking at a coin that can leap in value at auction. One more thing collectors watch out for is eye appeal. A coin with even light toning and full cartwheel luster can be worth dramatically more than one that's flat, dull, or has been cleaned. Original surfaces always command the strongest bids. In the broader picture of U.S. nickels, the 1905 Liberty Head is a perfect example of how condition drives value. A coin with nearly 30 million struck shouldn't, by logic, be worth tens of thousands of dollars. But because hardly any were preserved in pristine condition, that's exactly what we see in the market today. So whether you're holding a well-circulated 1905 worth pocket change, or you're hunting one of the elusive choice brilliant uncirculated gems, this coin tells the same story. Survival is everything. And when it comes to Liberty Head nickels, the 1905 date has proven itself as one of the true condition rarities of the series, a coin that can shock even seasoned collectors with its staggering auction results. The 1880 Shield nickel is one of those coins that doesn't just grab attention, it shocks collectors with its staggering values. In high grades, this nickel can bring life-changing money. For example, a PCGS MS66 example sold for over $40,000, while another gem quality piece in the same grade brought nearly $50,000 at auction. Even mid-grade mint state coins, MS632, must friggin' make command, $5,000 to $10,000, and examples graded MS65 are easily in the $15,000 to $25,000 range. And if you move into proof strikes, which were specially made for collectors in 1880, the prices climb even higher. brilliant proofs with cameo. Contrast can sell anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000, depending on the depth of the strike and the preservation of the surfaces. At the very top, a PR67 cameo has reached well beyond $40,000. These aren't just coins, they're treasures. Now, why such massive numbers? It all comes down to survival and rarity. The official mintage of the 1880 Shield nickel was 16,000 business strikes and 3,955 proofs. That's it. To put that into perspective, most Liberty nickels and Jefferson nickels were struck in the tens of millions. But here, the business strike mintage is almost laughably small. Fewer than 20,000 coins ever left the mint for circulation, and when you realize that most of those were actually melted down or heavily worn in commerce, the surviving number of problem-free examples is tiny. This makes the 1880 date one of the true key rarities of the Shield nickel series, right alongside the famous 1879 issue. In fact, many collectors consider the 1879 and 1880 nickels to be the twin giants of the series, dates that complete or break a Shield nickel collection. What makes it even trickier is the condition rarity factor. Circulated examples are scarce, but they do exist. You might find a heavily worn 1880 Shield nickel for $2,500 to $3,000, depending on the grade. Even a fine 12-piece can reach into the thousands. But if you want anything near uncirculated or proof-like surfaces, the pool of available coins becomes microscopic. That's where the bidding wars start and where the record-breaking prices are set. The design itself is also worth appreciating. Created by James B. Longacre, the Shield nickel was the first 5-cent coin struck in nickel, alloy by the U.S. Mint. Introduced in 1866 on the obverse, it carries the bold Union shield, symbolizing strength and unity after the Civil War, surrounded by a wreath and a cross. The reverse displays the numeral 5 encircled by stars and rays. By 1880, the design had already been criticized for its striking difficulties, with many examples showing weak detail, die cracks, or clashes. This only adds to the challenge of finding one in pristine condition. Another fascinating point: because of the tiny mintage and immediate rarity, collectors of the time were already aware that the 1880 nickel was something special. That explains why relatively more proofs survived compared to business strikes. Still, nearly 4,000 proofs isn't much at all, and high-grade survivors remain elusive. Auction records highlight just how much demand exists. In recent years, multiple MS66 and PR67 examples have shattered the $30,000 to $50,000 mark, with strong bidding from advanced Shield nickel specialists and registry set competitors. Even slightly lower-grade proofs, like PR64 or PR65, regularly pull $5,000 to $12,000. For collectors today, the 1880 Shield nickel represents a true test piece. It's not a coin you stumble upon in circulation, and it's not a coin you can simply buy casually. It requires patience, knowledge, and usually deep pockets. It's a key date that anchors the Shield nickel series and tells the story of a short-lived coin that struggled with production but left behind some of the most fascinating rarities in U.S. numismatics. So whether you're staring at a worn VG piece worth a couple thousand, or dreaming of owning a gem-proof example worth tens of thousands, the 1880 Shield nickel proves one thing clearly. In U.S. coinage, rarity plus survival equals staggering value. When you hear Shield nickel, one date that always stands out is 1866, the very first year this coin was ever struck. And not just any 1866 nickel, but the with-rays variety, a short-lived design type that lasted less than 2 years. Now let's talk about the jaw-dropping numbers first. A stunning MS66 Plus example of the 1866 with-rays Shield nickel has sold for nearly $30,000 at auction, while high-end proofs in PR66 and PR67 have crossed the $20,000 to $25,000 range. Even lower-level uncirculated examples can bring $500 to $5,000, and mid-grade circulated coins often trade for $150 to $500. So yes, even if you find a worn piece, you could be holding hundreds of dollars. The reason? First-year low survival and short design run. In 1866, the U.S. Mint introduced the Shield nickel, designed by James B. Longacre. as the first 5-cent piece struck in a copper-nickel alloy. Before this, the nickel didn't exist. 5-cent coins were silver half-dimes. But the Civil War caused hoarding of all silver and gold coins. So the mint created a new coin using base metals that wouldn't be melted for bullion value. The obverse features the bold Union shield, symbolizing strength and unity after the war, flanked by leaves and surmounted by a cross. The reverse shows a large numeral 5, surrounded by 13 stars, and most importantly, rays between the stars. That's why this variety is called with rays. Here's the catch: striking this coin was a nightmare. The nickel alloy was extremely hard on dies, and the rays only made matters worse, leading to weak strikes, die cracks, and rapid die failure. Collectors and mint workers alike complained. Because of this, by mid-1867, the mint removed the rays from the design, creating the no-rays type we know today. That makes the with-rays type unique to 1866, and part of 1867, instantly giving it collectible appeal. Now what about rarity? The official mintage for the 1866 with rays nickel is 14,742 500 coins, which sounds like a lot. But survival tells a different story. Most went into circulation immediately and were heavily worn. Uncirculated examples are much scarcer than the raw mintage suggests. Add to this the striking problems, and suddenly finding a sharp, fully detailed piece is very difficult. That's why the grading jump is so dramatic. An average AU coin might be worth a few hundred, but a gem MS-65 or better skyrockets into the tens of thousands. Proofs are another story. In 1866, the mint produced around 725 proof coins of the with rays type. That's a minuscule number compared to most other series. Today, perhaps only a few hundred survive, making them highly prized by specialists. These are the coins that regularly set records at auction, especially when they show strong cameo contrast or deep mirrors. Auction history proves the demand. A gorgeous PR67 Ultra Cameo sold for over $25,000, and registry set collectors continue to push the prices higher. On the business strike side, a PCGS MS66 Plus has reached nearly $30,000, with strong bidding wars reflecting just how tough this date is in top condition. Another layer of collectability comes from varieties. The 1866 with rays issue has several minor die variations, including differences in star placement, shield details, and repunching. Specialists love chasing these, which only adds to the challenge and excitement. For collectors today, the 1866 with rays is a cornerstone coin. It's not just the first shield nickel. It's also a one-year type that represents the growing pains of a new denomination. Owning one means holding a piece of the Civil War recovery era, when America was redefining its money system. And that's what makes it so valuable. Its history, rarity, and design all rolled into a single 5-cent piece. Whether it's a circulated coin worth a couple $100s, or a glittering gem proof worth tens of thousands, the 1866 with rays nickel stands as one of the most important coins in the Shield Nickel series and a must-have for serious collectors.